Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today, I'll be doing a full 3-player playthrough of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. This game is being funded through Kickstarter, and it is a 4X style game that puts you in the role of one of 4 different asymmetric races in this fantasy realm. You will start with a small capital and a couple of units on an island all to your own, but you will continue to explore, make units, start to fight with your opponents as you build up your capital and build different buildings for your faction, which are quite different from the abilities that the buildings from other factions are going to give. I'll explain how the rest of the game works while we're actually playing it, so let's jump in. Here we have the game board fully set up. This is a 3-player game. We will be playing as the dwarves here, and our home continent is going to be way up here in the northern part of the map. Then we have the elves, whose home continent is right here, and finally the orcs, who are going to be over here. In a 3-player game, we don't actually use any of these 3 continents, so as far as we're concerned, these don't exist at all, but we can still sail around to the various sea spots around them in order to explore some of these tokens. Let's look at our player board in a little more detail before we jump into our first turn, because we are the starting player, as you can see by this token right here. First, we have this resource track, which shows us how much food, ore, and mana we currently have. Each player starts at just 2 for each of those resources, and we're going to use those to do a variety of things. Then out here in this main part of the board, we can see the 5 different buildings that can be built and the various abilities that those buildings will have based on the level of our capital city. As you can see out on the map, our capital city is currently level 1. Once we go to level 2, it'll be a little bit higher, and then finally, if we get it to level 3, it'll be a humongous capital city. But for now, we're just at 1. Down at the bottom, we see all the different units that we can deploy out onto the board, and these 3 main ones are essentially our heroes, and we can only play them once we've unlocked certain buildings. And lastly, and probably most importantly, up here we have the different action spots that we can activate. There are 2 different sides. We have the capital actions over here and the command actions. And here is our courtyard, where we can see we have 2 peons and 1 warrior hanging out. We are ready to deploy them, so let's go ahead and do our first action. One thing I think we want to get to early on in the game is building our first level monastery here, because it's going to give us a discount on building any future buildings. So we want to get this done early. We are the dwarves. We figure we probably want to do quite a bit of building. However, if you look over here, you'll see that it costs 3 ore in order to build a building, and we only have 2 for the moment. So let's go ahead and do a march order. So I'm going to take one of these 2 different action tokens, and I'm going to put it here on march. And you'll notice there are 2 of these, which means you can actually do 2 separate march actions in a given round, and each round is going to last until everybody has taken 2 actions. So we're going to start by doing this march. We can move up to 5 units with 1 march order, but I think we're just going to take this peon and this warrior here, and they're going to go out onto the map. Let's take a quick look at the stats for these 2 so we can figure out how far we can actually walk. Looking down here, we see that peons have 1 attack value and the warriors have 2, and the peons can move twice and the warriors can move 3 times. The overall movement speed for a group of units is equal to the lowest movement speed of any of the units in that group. So we have 1 peon. That means this group can move a maximum of 2 spaces on the board. The courtyard on our player sheets is effectively where our current capital is. So we start here, and we just want to move once. We're going to go over here into this mountainous region, and we are going to stop here. And whenever you stop in a region that has any of these exploration markers, you then flip them over one at a time in case there are multiples, and you evaluate them. So we'll flip this one over, and this one's really simple. We just get to gain 1 of the green mana resource into our reserves right now, which brings us up to 3. And with that, our move action is done. It's worth noting that there is this little circle here on the map, and this is essentially where our peons can hang out in order to make extra resources at the end of the round, but I'll explain how all that works when we get there. It's worth noting that we technically have the ability to take another action right now, because if you see under command actions, it says you can do a muster action after you do your main action by using 1 peon to make a second command action. Now you use peons from your courtyard, so we could use this peon to, say, go on to march right here and move those units again out on the board, but I think it makes a lot more sense for us to just save this peon because we have better potential options for it on the other actions that our opponents take. So with this, let's go ahead and move over to the elves. They decided to do something very similar. It makes sense to try and do marches early in the game in order to get these peons out onto the board so they can start generating resources. And in fact, they're just going to pick up these 2 peons here and leave their warrior behind. They've got a movement of 2, so they'll go 1, 2. They don't have to stop and do exploration tokens on these spots. In fact, the only reason you would have to stop when you are marching is if there is an opponent's piece in the specific region. So they're going to go over here and they stop here, they flip over this exploration token. Oh, this is just going to get them 1 food. It's funny because they just went to this region in order to put 2 peons down, because you can see the 2 circles, so that they will make lots of food. So they are going to have food coming out their ears, I think. And this exploration bonus brings them to 3. The orc player also decides that they are going to march, so they are going to take one of their peons and one of their warriors, and they're just going to go 1 region up here and stop where there is food, and they flip this over and we see that that makes them an ore. That's very good for them. This brings them to 3, which is enough to build one of their buildings. We really wish we had found this exploration resource. And now the orc player decides that they actually do want to do this muster, and they'll put it down onto the march spot here so that they can move their units once again. They decide to take just this warrior and they move 1, 2 times up into the top area. And the reason for this is because once everybody has taken 2 actions, then we will all collect resources. And you get 1 resource for every single region that you control, and then you get bonus resources for these peons being in the little circles. So by putting this warrior up here and controlling that region, the orc player will generate 1 mana. So they stop over here. Let's see what their exploration token is. Oh my gosh, it's a mana and a food. That one's awesome for them. So they now have 3 of each resource. It now comes back to us for our second action, and we're thinking, maybe we should have done that muster in order to move around twice and get more of those exploration tokens. They're really quite good, but I think instead let's take this and put it down into the taxation spot. Now, first of all, down here you can see that our opponents can use one of their peons to follow another player's capital action, and this is a capital action. However, neither the elves or the orcs have any peons available to themselves, so we're very safe in going to this spot right now. So let's go ahead and see how this one works. Looking at this little chart, we see that we can grab 2 ore, 3 food, or 4 mana. I think that food is better for us so we can get some more units out on the field, so we're going to grab 3 food, and once everybody has followed, and in this case nobody can follow, then the best one of these goes down to the bottom, and the other 2 rotate up to the top. So next time somebody taxes, there's going to be even more food available. So we jump from 2 food all the way up to 5. It's time for the elves' second action, and they decide they want to recruit. Now, whenever anybody takes a capital action, everybody else can follow, and technically this can happen simultaneously. I'll of course show the elves first, and then the orcs, and then us, but when you're actually playing the game with other people, these can all happen at the same time to make the game faster. With the recruit action, you can take a single new unit from off the board and put them into your courtyard. The only exception is the peon, where you could spend 1 food to make 1, or you could spend 3 food in order to put 2 peons out with a single recruit action, and this is what the elf player decides to do. So that's going to cost them 3 food, so they go down to 0, and the new peons go into their courtyard. The orc player has no free peons because they use this one to do the muster, so they cannot follow. But fortunately for us, we can. So we can go over here and use this peon for the recruit action. And it's important to note that we would not be able to do this if we had already done a recruit action of ourselves. So we can only follow into an action that we have not done yet. And I think we're going to follow suit to the elves. We're going to spend 3 of our food, bringing us back down to 2, in order to grab 2 more peons and put them out onto the board. At this point in the game, things are not very aggressive, so it makes sense to have lots of peons to generate lots of resources and do a bunch of stuff. We now come to the orc player's second and last action, and they are a little bummed. They would love to go ahead and build a building because they now have 3 resources, but in order to build a building, you have to have a free peon in your courtyard to put down here, and I'll show how that works probably in the next round. So for now, they figure, well, they also can't march anymore because they've used both of these. They don't have any boats to sail, they don't have any flying things to fly, and they don't have any spells to cast. So they've got to pick one of these capital actions, and they decide to go to tax themselves. One big reason for this is because we've already done it, so we cannot actually follow. It does mean that the elf player can follow them, but they figure it's better to just help one opponent than both of us. If they were to go to research, for instance, then everybody would get to do it. So they're going to tax. They decide to grab 3 ore, bringing them up to 6. And the elf player does follow. They take one of their peons, put it on the tax location, and let's see, looking around, they are going to take the 4 food, bringing them from 0 all the way up to 4. Our actions are now done, so in order to end the round, everybody needs to simultaneously grab the resources they get from out on the map. We are going to get, let's see, 2 ore, because 1 just for being in the region and 1 for our peon being there. The orc player is going to get 2 food, 1 for the peon and 1 for the region, as well as 1 magic because they control that 1 forest over there. And finally down here, the elf player is just going to get 3 food because that's the only region they control, and there are 2 circles in that region with 2 peons. So we go to 4 ore. The elf player is going to go up to 7 food, and the orc player is going to get 2 food, and they're also going to grab that 1 magic. With that, the first round of the game is over, so we're going to pass the starting player token over to the right, and now all peons that were used for actions come back into the main courtyard areas of each person's spot. All of the action markers come off, and we are able to start the next round of the game. Before we do that, however, I now want to discuss how the game ends and what we're really trying to do while we're playing the game, now that you've seen one full action round to see the sort of different options that we could do. Obviously, we haven't battled yet, but that's probably coming relatively soon. So this is a 4X style game. We have Expand, we've got Explore, we have Exploit, and then finally we have Exterminate down here. And once one of these 4 conditions have been met, then the game is going to come to an end, and we're going to score the victory points we have, and whoever has the most points wins. So this is a game about accruing points in a variety of ways, but let's talk about those 4 endgame conditions. The first is Expand, and we see that once anybody has recruited all of their peons and warriors out onto the board, then we are going to enter an endgame state. There is Explore, and this is what happens once every single one of these exploration tokens, including all these out in the sea way over here, have been flipped up and taken advantage of. Over here we have Exploit, so this one says once you built all 3 of your towers. Now I haven't shown these yet, but each player gets these great little tower pieces, and these can be built out onto different spots on the board, and they are effectively a increase to your overall power, because units can come out of your courtyard into your capital, but also into your tower locations. Plus, locations with towers generate 2 extra resources. So these towers are really great, but they cost money the farther they are away from your capital, and they can be destroyed by opponents through battle. And lastly, we have Exterminate. Speaking of being destroyed, this ends the game once any one player has destroyed the capital city of an opposing player. This also initiates the endgame, so there is no player elimination. Once somebody gets eliminated, the game ends. When the game is over, we're going to get points for a big variety of things. We'll get points for the different units we have on the board. We'll get points for the different regions we control on the board, as well as the level of our capital city being upgraded and the different buildings we built. There are a couple other ways, including battle. We'll be accruing points throughout the game as we win battles. So there's just a bunch of different things that are going to get us points. Let's now jump into the second round with the elf player and start to see maybe a little bit more interesting interactions between the players. They decide they want to do the recruit action. They're going to go ahead and spend 3 more food, to go 1, 2, 3, to build 2 more peons. They have, let's see, 1 warrior and 6 peons now in their overall army out on the map, although 5 of them are currently in the courtyard. And now we can go ahead and follow. Let's do the orc player first. They're definitely going to go onto the recruit spot and spend 3 food, bringing them down to 2, in order to get 2 more peons into their courtyard. They were feeling pretty tight on peons. And what the heck, we'll go ahead and follow as well. We're just going to spend 1 food in order to make the single extra peon. It'll be nice to have around because we're going to start building these guys out soon. It's the orc player's turn now, and they've decided they want to do a build action. In order to do this, you have to have a free peon, as I mentioned before, and then you put that peon down into the associated spot on their board, because there are 5 different buildings they can build. They've decided to build a blood tent by putting the peon right here. That's going to it's going to cost them 3 of their ore, so they go from 6 down to 3. And since their capital is currently level 1, the only ability that this gives them is, before they choose tactic cards in battle, they can spend 2 mana to change 1 peon in that battle into a warrior. So that seems like a pretty versatile ability for them when they get into combat, which they're probably going to be trying to do relatively soon. We are very happy to follow in on that build action. We've already done 2 actions this round, and we haven't even spent any of our main ones. We have 4 ore, so we're going to go all the way down to 1, and we'll take this peon here, and we're going to build the monastery. This is really simple. It just says that building costs are -1 for us for the rest of the game. That is awesome. So we are hoping to build more buildings. I mean, we have 4 more total. That's going to essentially save us 4 ore total if we decide to build all of the buildings we have available to us. And of course, this can get better as we upgrade our capital city. Right now, that's the only benefit this building gets us. But if we were to upgrade to level 2, and we see that costs 4 ore, 4 mana, and 4 food in order to do, then we would gain the additional benefit of these towers that I was talking about. They would give +1 to our battle rating when we are defending. So it makes us a little bit better at defending off the orcs, and potentially the more defensive we are, the more likely the orcs are to go and attack the elves. And that's not to say that the elves are particularly bad at attacking. In fact, all 3 of these races are quite good at attacking each other. It just seems like the orc player right now is going on a slightly more aggressive path than the elf player is. Well, it's now actually our turn, so let's go ahead and use this action to do a march action out on the board. I think that we could really use some food. Let's just go ahead and go over to this region. We'll pop open the exploration token, and then this will generate us 1 extra food at the end of the round, as long as we're still here. And let's see, oh, this is a different option than the ones we've seen so far. In fact, this one is great. We find a bunch of farmers, and one of them decides they want to be a peon for us. So this just generates us a free peon in that region. That's awesome. That's going to be another food that we generate at the end of the turn. We could use this peon to do a muster command, but I think we want to keep him in our courtyard to hopefully piggyback on one of our opponents doing a capital action. The elves use their second action to do a march. They're going to take 2 of their peons, and let's see, they're actually going to take this warrior as well. Their movement is currently capped at 2, so they're going to go 1 into this desert. And you'll notice that deserts don't come with any exploration tokens at all, and they also don't generate anything. And then 2, they'll go up into this forest, which has 2 spots for their peons. They'll flip over the exploration token, and looks like they're going to make an extra mana for that, so that's going to be quite a bit of mana coming their way on this turn. So that brings them to 3, and now they've decided they are going to do a muster command. So they'll take this peon, put them into the march section, and they're going to march this peon out onto the board. They think they need ore as well as all the other stuff they're generating, so they're going to go into this mountain region and flip over the token, and this generates yet another magic. They're going to have so much of this at the end of the turn. Well, I suppose they were only at 3, so this brings them to 4. They are definitely going to have quite a bit. I think once we look out on the board, they're going to be at 7, which is a very decent amount. They're probably going to want to look into getting some spell cards they can spend that mana, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The Orc player also decides they're going to do a march. They're going to take their last peon from their courtyard and send them out into the second food generating region in their continent. So they're going to flip over this exploration token, and wow, these are the mines. It allows the player to take 3 resources of their choice. They decide to take the food, which brings them up to 5. They have a bunch of recruiting that they want to do. And now it's time for our last action of the round. I think let's go ahead and march again, this time taking this peon and putting him out on the board. Food is a good thing to have because we need to keep recruiting people, I think. So let's go ahead and go up to this region, flip over to this exploration token, and nice. We're going to get food and mana for this. And then, of course, another 2 food at the end of the round. Round 2 is now coming to a close, so we all generate our resources. We are going to get, let's see, 2 ore, 2 food, and then 2 more food. So 4 food and 2 ore total. The elves are going to get 3 food for this. They're going to get 3 mana for this location and 2 ore for this one, so they're making tons of stuff. And finally, the orcs, they're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 food, and then 1 magic. The starting player is going to shift over. We're going to reset all of our actions, and we're good to go for the 3rd round of the game. The Orc player is beginning, and they have 9 food. They have really got to do something about this. And as much as it pains them to hire more recruits or more of these peons, I think they're going to need to do that. They just need these peons in order to double back on the actions that we do, as well as doing these muster commands. And right now, they're kind of falling behind in a resource race on the board. And there's something to be said for just attacking an opponent who has a bunch of weak peons like the elf player, but at the moment they're not in a position in order to really do much about that. So they're going to go ahead and spend 1, 2, 3 of their food. This is going to get them 2 more peons for them to play with, and they are probably going to be doing some mustering later to move their units out around on the map, maybe not have quite so many on their food. Let's go ahead and follow with that recruit action, and one more time, I think we have 6, let's go down to 3, and let's put 2 more peons out. This brings us to 8 out of our 12 peons. I think we're going to be able to start focusing our food on other units pretty soon, but you know, this is a type of game where we need to generate resources and generate an engine in order to do a bunch of other things, and these peons are the main way that we're going to get a whole bunch of these resources. So we are still in the kind of passive resource generation section of the game. And what the heck, the elf player will follow and do the exact same thing, spending them 3 out of their 7 food, bringing them down to 4. I think we want to start with a march action. Each continent has 2 different march locations, and these spots have 2 exploration tokens but generate 0 resources for us when we actually control it. But these tokens can be pretty darn good, so I think let's go here and see what happens. It might affect our other options for the second action in this turn. We're going to evaluate them from the top down. So the first one is just going to get us a food. That's pretty great. And the next one is, ooh, this is unstable ground, and it says that I must immediately move all my units in this spot to an adjacent space, and I'm totally okay with that. Let's go ahead and jump back into the capital. And the reason for this is we can now, for a future march action, grab a bunch of people, up to 5, and move them out together. When I have my units spread out on the map, it's kind of hard to consolidate them into one big fighting army to move into a spot. So let's go ahead and take our 1 free food we got from that exploration token, and I think let's go ahead and use this peon here in order to do a muster so that we can do another march. Now that this warrior is back, let's go ahead and take them and one of these peons, and let's send them 1, 2 over to this mountain region. We are already making some ore, but this is good because you'll notice these fairy lines. This means that the orc player could potentially move over here and attack us, so I don't really want to leave just a regular old peon in this spot, so we've got a little bit of fortification. We can now flip this token over and we see we have found a dark wizard. So this is not the best encounter. We are going to either lose a unit or spend 2 mana. But if we spend the 2 mana, then we're going to get a free spell off the top of the deck. I don't like the idea of losing units, so let's go ahead and spend those 2 to draw the top spell. We see this is a harvest spell, and I haven't really talked about these yet. You'll notice we have a hand limit of 1 spell right now because our capital is level 1. Once we upgrade it to level 2, then we're going to be able to hold 2 spells. So this one right here, it costs 3 mana in order to cast, and it'll give us 2 victory points when we do it. It's a capital spell, and it lets us select a region we control and collect 1 resource from that region and every adjacent region. So this is a huge way to grab a bunch of resources by doing this cast command action. Speaking of spells, it's now the elf player's turn, and they decide to go to the research spot with their action. What happens here is they get to draw 3 cards from the top of the spell deck. They're going to select, and they're going to get to keep as many of these as they want to based on their current hand limit, which is still 1 for them. So they're going to grab 1 of these spells. They decide to keep this one here. The orc player is interested in following suit, so they're going to draw 3 cards. And they're going to keep this one and discard these 2. Lastly, we could follow on with this research, but we actually quite like this card here. We can only hold 1, so there's no real reason for us to follow. For the orc player's second action, they've decided to go ahead and tax. They're going to grab 4 ore from the taxation area, bringing them up to 7. We are going to follow, and we're going to take the 3 magic, bringing us to 5, so that we have enough to play this harvest spell on our last action of the round. And the elf player decides they are going to follow as well, taking 4 ore as well, bringing them up to 8. Like I just mentioned, let's go ahead and use this cast ability to cast this spell here. It's going to cost 3 of our magic, bringing us back down to 2. It's going to get us 2 victory points immediately, which puts us in the lead on this track. And honestly, we don't have any amazing spots for this. We only can get 2 resources total, so it almost makes sense to hold on to this, but with a hand size of only 1, and we'll potentially have future abilities to get more spells, I think it makes sense to spend the spells as we actually get them, and not hoard them for potentially slightly better use later. So let's go ahead and activate this region that we control, getting 1 food, and we'll go ahead and get 1 mana for this adjacent region here. Obviously, the swamp gets us nothing, and the capital city locations don't generate anything. None of the spots that we control are adjacent to 2 other resource generating things, unfortunately. So we have 5 food and 3 mana. The elf player decides it's time for them to build. They've actually done every single one of the capital actions on this round. They are going to go ahead and build their shadow guild right here. So they're going to use this peon to go into this spot. That's going to cost them 1, 2, 3 of their ore, and we can see now they can spend 2 mana to substitute for any one of another resource type that they might be lacking. Obviously, they're not lacking in any resources at the moment, but they feel this one's pretty nice. Also, it unlocks the ability for them to build this assassin, which is a pretty cool hero. I haven't really talked about these heroes much yet, and I hopefully will start to see them on the board soon. They are pretty good at combat and moving around, but the important thing is they have these special abilities that are tied to the various levels of the city. So obviously we are all at the first level city for the moment, so if they were to build an assassin, then it would gain an extra 2 movement when moving by itself. That makes sense. But if they upgraded their city, then it would gain this ability here, which is +2 attack power when fighting at least 1 other hero unit. So they're good at assassinating other heroes. So we'll start seeing these as we go on. Each of the races has 3 of these heroes to play with. The orc player decides they are going to copy on the build action from the elf, and they are actually going to upgrade their city level. So they're going to go from level 1 to level 2. We see that costs 4 of each of the resources, and they are ready for that. So they're going to go down to 1 mana, 2 food, and finally they're going to go down to 3 ore. We will now take the second tier piece and add it to their capital city area. They can now carry 2 spells at a time. The defense of their capital went from 2 up to 4, and more importantly, this blood tent right here now gives the following benefit to the orc player: that in battle, every peon in the enemy's army grants +1 attack value to the orc player. And with that, we're done with the actions. So we now all take our resources. We are going to get, let's see, 4 food over here, as well as 4 ore. The elf player is going to get, let's see, it's 1, 2, 3 food. They're going to get 2 ore and then 3 magic. So the elf player is still making tons of resources. And the orc player over here is going to get 4 food and 1 magic. We are going to once again be the start player. We reset all of our actions and we're good to go for the 4th round of the game. For our first action, I think let's go ahead and do a recruit, and this time let's recruit our priestess. We see that she costs 3 of our food, bringing us down to 6, and 2 of our mana, bringing us down to 1. She has 3 attack power, 2 movement, which makes her the strongest person we have right now, and because we're only a level 1 city, it says right here that whenever we march any army, we can place the priestess into that army. So essentially, she can teleport into any moving army that I have out on the map, which is pretty good. That means she's going to be pretty much wherever I need her to be when I need it. So she goes into our courtyard. The elves decide they are going to follow, and with this recruit action, they are going to build the assassin. This costs them 5 food, bringing them down to 2, and this guy's going to come out. I just talked about a minute ago that whenever this guy is moving alone, he gets +2 movement. His movement is already 4, so that means by himself, this person can move up to 6 spots, but they only have an attack value of 2. And the orcs will follow as well. They are going to do one more wave of peons, which brings them up to the same amount of peons that the elves and we have as well. And one of the reasons they're doing that is because they know they have this ability where they can turn magic into warriors, or they can turn peons into warriors. So it makes sense for them to have these guys in their arsenal. The elf player now decides they want to do a march action. They've had these 2 peons and a warrior hanging out here making magic for quite a while, but now they're maxed out on magic. There's really no reason for them to be there for the moment, so they are going to move. You'll see these fairy lines here, which show how we can connect the different continents together. They have peons in this group, which means their maximum movement is 2, so they're going to go 1, 2, and march right into this region where we have just a single peon. So right from the beginning, we now have a battle. They have to stop right here because there's enemy units in that region, and we can count up the strength. We have 1 peon, so we're at 1 strength, and they are at 1 strength for each of their peons and 2 for their warrior, so it's currently 4 to 1. Now, each player in the battle needs to choose one of the 7 tactics cards in these identical decks. There are a variety of different options in here, so let's go ahead and look at them now. The first card is Retreat. We see that it would cost 2 food, and it's only usable by the defender, which is us. We also cannot win if we are using the Retreat, and we will lose 2 victory points unless our opponent picks the conscripts or first strike cards out from this set of tactics cards. So we could use this in order to just move our peon back and try to save the peon so we don't lose them, but we could lose victory points, which isn't great. The next one is just Fight. It's really simple. It adds 0 strength. It's free to play, and it has no bonuses, but it'll give you 2 victory points if you win the battle with this card, so that's pretty good. Next is First Strike, which is 2 extra strength to the person who plays this card. It does cost 4 mana, and we see that we have 1 mana, so we're not going to be playing this one, but you see down here that it gives +3 strength as in addition to the 2 if playing against the card Siege, and it straight up cancels the conscripts card. So this is really good if you think your opponent is going to play conscripts. Now we have conscripts. So this costs 1 food for each of the units that you pull from adjacent regions into the battle region. So it's a nice way to increase the amount of people you have. And we see it also increases the strength value of your army by 1 for each of these that you pull in. And there are a couple other bonuses against Barricade and Siege. And it gives you 3 points if you win with conscripts. So a very powerful card. Now we have Charge, which costs 6 mana, and the elf player has 6, we only have 1, so the elf player might think about playing this because if we look down here it says that if it's used against a retreating opponent, then they lose 3 strength worth of units. So just because you retreat does not mean that you're going to save all of your units, and in fact there's another +2 against a first strike. Now we have the 6th card, which is Barricade, so this is only usable by the defender. It costs 4 ore, which we do currently have. It gives 3 bonus strength, and then down here we see it gives 4 more strength against Siege and 3 against Charge. So it's really good if we think our opponent might do something like Charge, and we see that since they have 10 mana, that is something that they might do. And the final one is Siege, which is only usable by the attacker, so we cannot use it, we are the defender, but we see it costs 4 ore, and down here, if it's used against a retreat, it's yet another way to kind of kill some of their units as they're retreating, and gives a really big bonus against Charge. Right now in the battle, we are down 3 strength from our opponent, so I think let's go ahead and play this barricade card. And it's important to note that you only spend these resources if you win the battle with the card. So I think if we win the battle, we'd be okay with losing 4 ore to get 1 victory point. So we're going to select this one, and we now wait for the elf player to choose as well. Once we've both picked, we're going to flip them over and evaluate the rest of the battle. So we see that the elves chose first strike. So they now have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strength, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 strength. They did not play charge or siege, so we don't get any other benefits. So that means that we are going to lose this battle, and we thought that was pretty likely to happen. So we don't have to spend this 4 ore, which is definitely handy, and the elf player does have to spend this 4 magic, and we see down here that they are going to get 2 victory points for doing this. So they're down to 6 magic, and tied with us on the score tracker. And finally, since we lost this battle, we must vacate the region entirely because there can only be 1 race's units in each region. Also, we are going to calculate our total strength and in units, which right now is 1, and we have to lose half of that rounded up straight off the board. So we only have 1, so obviously 1 divided by in half and then rounding up is 1, so that means this peon is going to go away. It means if we had a second peon in this battle, then that one would have been saved and would have run back to our capital city, but with just 1 peon, maybe that's our mistake. We didn't realize we were leaving ourselves quite so vulnerable. We have to pay a little more attention to defending ourselves. The orc player now decides they want to do a move action. They decide to move 2 of their peons out onto the board, and they will go 1, 2 into these mountain regions here. There are 2 different spots, so they can make quite a bit of ore there, and we now flip over the exploration token. Uh-oh, they have bumped into a monster. They now have a decision to make. They can either discard 2 food and gain a victory point, essentially feeding the monster, or they could lose 1 of their units. I think at this point, they're going to lose the food. This brings them all the way down to 1, but as a consolation prize, they do get 1 victory point. They're now going to use this peon to muster and march once again, taking this peon and putting them out on the board. And they decide not to move far, they're just going to go right into this forest region here, hope to have better luck with this exploration token, and yes, they get a food and an ore for that spot. So they've now got 4 ore and 2 food. It's our turn again. We've got a bunch of peons in our capital as well as our priestess, and we just lost some territory. I think let's go ahead and march right back in there and try to retake it. So here we are with 3 peons and 1 priestess, and we're going to move into this region trying to have a really strong force to kick out the elf player. Now we currently have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, we have 6 strength to the 4 of the elf player. So once again, we look to our cards, and this time we are the attacker, and we want to figure out what we think our opponent is going to do, because that's really going to dictate what we pick. Because right from the get-go, Siege looks great. It's attacker only, it costs 4 ore, but it gives some victory points, and if they retreat, then we can actually kill 1 of their peons, so that's really nice. But the issue is, if they pick Barricade, which they could do, they have the ore to afford it, and we go Siege, then they'll be at +7 to our +4. That is 3 difference, which will more than make up the 2 strength advantage we currently have. We really don't want to lose this one. So instead, we could potentially do conscripts, because conscripts gets +2 against barricades. But the problem with conscripts is if they pick first strike, that will cancel conscripts. And they might want to pick first strike because, well, that gives +3 against siege. Although, now that I look at it, 3 + 2, that is 5, and this is 4, and that's only a difference of 1, and they would need a difference of 2 in order to tie things up and actually win it. So we just need to figure out, do we think they are going to be retreating or not? And I think, well, let's just go ahead with the siege. I like the look of this from the very beginning, so we are going to pick siege and now see what the elf player does. They have made their decision, we flip them over, and we see that we are lucky. They picked first strike, mostly because they were expecting us to use conscripts because we have this adjacent peon to pull over here, and there's a bunch of victory points associated with conscripts. So they did this to try and cancel it out, but that did not work out in their favor. And so what this actually means is they don't have to spend the magic. We will have to spend our 4 ore, and we end up being victorious because we have 10 total, and they have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 3 more. Yep, that is 9. So we win by 1. So let's lose our 4 ore and gain 2 victory points. This brings us down to 3, and we're up to 4 victory points. The elf player must now retreat their units back, but they also have to lose half of their strength rounded up. So we see that they are at 4, so they can either lose 1 warrior or 2 peons, and they decide that they're going to lose the warrior, and the 2 peons are going to go back to their courtyard. The elf player decides to spend their second action remobilizing all of these people they have in their courtyard. So that's 3 peons and their assassin. They start in their courtyard and they're just going to move once, twice into this forest, once again kind of maintaining the line they were at before, I guess foraying over here and trying to take that one supposedly weak peon. Did not necessarily work out great for the elf player in the long run for this turn. And lastly, we have the orc player choosing the build action. They are going to build the first tower of the game. We can see that towers cost 1 ore for each space away they are from your capital city, and they're worth 1 point for each space away as well. In addition to that, the courtyard in your capital city is effectively adjacent to wherever your towers are, so this is a way of moving your units around the board a little bit faster. The orc player decides to put the tower down into this region right here. These towers also produce you 2 extra resources in the region they're at, so this is going to make them 2 more food, and they have a base strength of 3 when people try to attack in this region. So all in all, a great thing to have. I guess I'll kind of put the peon on top of that for the moment, I guess. No, that doesn't make sense. The peon should be in the circle. But either way, that's going to cost them 2 ore because they are 1-2 spots away from their capital. This drops them down to 2 for everything. We don't have any peons, as doesn't the elf player, so nobody is going to follow, and that's the last action of this round. We now collect resources from out on the board. We are going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 food total. This only has 1 spot for a peon, so that's 2 more ore plus another 2 over there. So just like last time around, it's 4 food and 4 ore for us. The elves, I don't think they've changed either. They're going to get 3 food here, 3 magic, and 2 ore. But the orc is definitely able to expand much more in this round. They're going to get a lot of resources unlike the previous rounds. So this right here is going to get them 1, 2, 3, 4 food for that region alone, and then another 5, 6 food for this, so 6 total. And then they're going to get 3 magic for these 2 spots over here, and then they're going to get 3 ore down here. So a bunch of resources for the orc player. The start player now moves to the elf player, and we go ahead and reset all of our actions. The elf player starts out by doing a build action, and they've decided they want to get a tower out onto the map as well. They decide to place it into this region right here that is 2 away from their citadel, so that's going to cost them 2 ore, and they're mostly doing this to try and defend this intersection point where all 3 of these islands come together. They were worried after last turn's foray that they were left a little bit weaker than their opponents, especially with this huge amount of people that we have kind of standing on their doorstep, and the orc player's technology that is quite good at invalidating the peons in battle. So this tower is certainly going to help. So that cost them 2 ore, bringing them to 7. The orc player decides to pass on following the elf for the building, and we have no peons, so we can't follow. So it comes to the orc player's turn, and they are actually going to do a build, but they needed this peon in order to do that building, which is why they didn't follow. So they have decided that they are going to build this air spire down here. That's going to cost them 3 ore, and more importantly, it unlocks the dragon for them to be able to recruit out into the air, and this is the air part of the overall game. This dragon can fly 4 spaces in any direction, really. The only restriction it has is it can't end its turn out at sea. It has 2 attack, but with the level 1 and 2 upgrades, it's pretty great. If it wins a battle, they gain a food, and right at the very beginning of the battle, this dragon just eats a peon in the battlefield. So that could be a pretty big swing of power when they're actually playing, and the dragon can carry 1 person on their back. So quite a bit of cool stuff coming down the pipe. You can bet that the orc player is planning on trying to get this dragon built on this turn. It's our turn again, and as lame as it sounds, I think that we should go to the recruit spot and get ourselves 2 more peons. We already have a bunch of peons out on the board, but none are in our courtyard, and we need these guys in order to build more buildings, as well as be able to follow on our opponent's turns. We could, of course, spend actions to move peons back into our courtyard, but we're pegged out on food right now, so we should probably do this anyway. We can't even build a princess again, so let's just go ahead and bring this down to 7, and that gets us these guys in our courtyard. The elf player decides they are going to follow and do the exact same thing we did, bringing themselves from 5 down to 2 food in order to get 2 more of their peons out onto their board as well. They only have 2 peons left in their supply. We have 3 because one of them died in battle, but that is a ton of peons out on the board. The elf player is definitely pushing this engine that they've got going, and they have not really been getting that much military power out onto the board. We'll see how that does for them. For the elf player's second action, they are going to do a march, and they're going to grab 2 of these peons here, and they're going to go down into this food-making region. Oh, I guess only one of them really needs to be there. I guess they'll leave 1 up here, even though it's a little bit overkill. So, well, I guess having these people clumped up is better, because this peon over here, well, it's pretty much effectiveless against the orc player because they have that ability where in the battle every peon in the enemy's army grants them +1, so essentially it negates themselves. It doesn't really help to have peons in this front line. It does against us, but this tower is a pretty good defense against us for the moment, so they'll put these guys down here, keep them clumped up so that they can potentially move them with one action later on, and they'll flip over this token and it's going to give them a magic. That is unfortunate. That's really the one thing they didn't want. Because this brings them to 10, they really need to start, I think, using spells and using all this magic they've been generating throughout the game. They decide they don't really need these 2 peons here, so they're going to send one of them over here to do the muster action to get another march going. And they'll send this peon I just talked about being clustered up. Well, actually, maybe they'll just send this person, because right now they're pegged out on magic. This person is 2, so there's effectively 5 strength in this region. I guess they don't want to leave this too weak because losing a tower would be bad. They'll move this person into the swamp and just reveal a couple of these exploration tokens and hope that they are pretty good for them. The first one is going to get them, a food and an ore that's good for them. And the second thing, this is a wandering knight. They can spend an ore in order to get a warrior in this spot. I think they're definitely going to do that. So they get their food and their ore and then spend the ore and put the warrior back on the board. They are quite happy with that. The orc player is now going to recruit, and they've been planning to try and get to this point for quite a while. They're finally here. They are going to summon a dragon. This swoops into their courtyard here. They're going to have to spend 3 food and 3 mana in order to do this, but they are very okay with doing that. They now have this dragon. It can pick up 1 person, and it's really good at eating peons out on the battlefield. It's now the last action of the round, and we're going to go ahead and do a march. Things have de-escalated around here a little bit, and we only get the benefit of having 1 peon in this mountain zone, so I think we'll take these 2 and go 1, 2, all the way up to this region up here. We will now reveal the exploration token, and we see, this one is a portal, and in fact, this one stays on the board. If we reveal other portals, then the portals are effectively adjacent to each other. Now, I could spend 2 ore right now to fill this in, but I think I'll go ahead and just leave it out there. That could be interesting as a backdoor for us to jump in on somebody else, depending on if any more of these portals are actually opened up. It's a bit of a bummer we don't get any specific bonus for flipping that exploration token right now, though. And let's go ahead and muster and do 1 more march. Our magic is really low, and this zone only has a spot for 1 bonus on a peon, so we'll jump over here to this other forest, flip over this exploration, and this one is another mine. That's going to get us 3 resources of our choice. I think we obviously take 1, 2, 3 of our magic, and it looks like we are going to be pretty much tapped out on all of our resources at the start of the next turn. It'll be interesting to see how we can turn those into stuff out on the board. It's once again time for resource collection. We are going to get 4 food over here. We're going to get our 4 ore, but as a new thing, we are also going to get 4 magic over here. So 4, 4, and 4. The elf down here is going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 food. They're going to get 2 ore over here, and they are going to generate 2 magic for the spot, even though they are capped out, so they won't get anything for it, and the swamp does nothing for them. And over here with the orcs, they're going to get 3 ore for this spot. They'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 food, and then they're going to get 3 more magic. Getting 4 of each actually caps us out with our food and our ore, but I think we're pretty okay with that. We'll now pass the start player token over to the orcs and reset all of our actions. The orc player begins by doing a recruit action, and they are going to get their shaman going. This is associated with their blood tent down here. We see it's going to cost them 3 food and 2 magic, so they come down to 3 magic and then down to 7 food, and this comes right into their courtyard where it could potentially just jump right onto this dragon right here. I think that we should follow, and it's probably a good idea to start getting some more of these warrior units out onto the board. That only costs us 2 food, so it brings us down to 8. And the elf player decides to do the exact same thing. It's now our turn, and I think we are going to go ahead and do a build action, and we are going to build the first sea dock of the game. So we'll put, we'll put this peon down here. It's only going to cost us 2 ore, so we're actually kind of having trouble spending all the resources we have available to us. We maybe have a little bit too many peons out in the field, and we now have the ability to recruit barges. Well, just 1 barge is this huge thing that can carry 3 different people, and we can go out onto the ocean. The elf player is going to follow by using this peon over here, and they've decided to upgrade their capital to their level 2. That's going to cost them 4 of everything, so they're down to 2 food, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the ore, and then just 6 of the mana. And they can put the second level under their capital. The orc player has no peon, so they cannot copy the action. The elf player decides they are going to research, so they get to draw 3 cards, and they already have 1 card, and they can kind of discard and keep the ones they want to. They have a max hand size of 2 now, so that they have the potential to maybe start using all this mana, although they did just consume 4 of it, but they're probably just going to get a bunch back. They decide to keep these 2 and discard these, and neither us or the orc player can follow because we don't have the associated peons. It's the orc player's turn, and for the first time in the game, they are doing the fly command. They're going to put their shaman into the backseat of their dragon, and they're going to fly off. Unfortunately for us, it looks like they're heading in our direction. They have 4 movement, and they can fly over the ocean. Again, they cannot end their turn on the ocean, so they can go 1, 2, 3, and then 4, landing in this region right here. So this guy kind of pops out right there, and we now have a battle. But before the battle even happens, the dragon is just going to eat this peon right here. The shaman has 3 strength, and the dragon has 2, so that's a total of 5 strength versus just the 2 of this poor little warrior right here. Once again, we look at the card options we have available to us, and this is not looking too good for us. I think retreat might make sense for us to try and save that unit. I mean, it costs 2 food to save the 2 foods worth of unit, but it would potentially protect us from needing to, well, spend another action to recruit a new warrior. So that is not bad. We're certainly not going to be fighting. Conscripts. Now there is, let's see, there are 2 different peons that are adjacent to this zone. We're not sure if they're going to be sieging or barricading, but we could spend 2 food instead of retreating to bring 2 peons into that zone. But the problem is that peons give +1 strength to our opponent because of the blood tent for the orc. So conscripts does not make sense. Charge, I think we could technically afford. They're certainly not going to be retreating. We're not sure if they'd first strike. In fact, I think it's, well, they might first strike in order to cancel us conscripting people over, but I don't think charge makes sense. We are not the attacker, so we kind of have these 3 options here. We could barricade. We have the ore to afford it, and if they do a siege or charge, then that'll give us a nice big bonus as well, but I think being 3 behind is a pretty unfortunate situation for us to be in here, especially considering the kind of cards they have. I think that it's very likely that they are also going to do conscription because they could pull this warrior up into this zone. So I feel like we should probably do first strike, which would potentially cancel their conscription, but we'd also probably lose the person, or we could retreat knowing we wouldn't lose the points if they did do a conscription or a first strike. They're both pretty good options. This one costs 2 food, this one costs 4 magic. We don't really have a reason for magic at the moment, so let's go ahead and do first strike. The orc player has now decided, so we're going to flip these over, and yep, it looks like they did do conscripts, so our first strike is going to directly negate that, so that's cool. It lets them not pull their orc person over, but it does mean that we still lose this battle. We're not going to have to pay the 4 magic. Maybe we should have retreated after all because, well, we wouldn't have lost the points and we would have been able to save our person. I might have talked myself into a little bit of a circle there, but that is how that fell out. So we are going to lose this battle. We don't spend the 4 magic. Our opponent does not have to pay for conscripts because it just got straight up canceled. This person is just going to die, unfortunately, and the orc player gets 3 points for that. So they're pretty happy with how that whole battle worked out for them. These 3 points bring the orc player tied with us at 4 points. It's now our turn. We have 1 action. That was a pretty painful fight right there. I think we should probably go to research. We have all this magic. We really should spend it. So we can go ahead and draw 3 cards. We should also probably upgrade to our 2nd level city so we can keep more magic on us. And let's see what our options are. We have an interrupt. This says copy spell. It lets you copy the spell just played, paying the same amount of magic, and you also gain the victory points for it. So that's kind of neat. If we like the look of somebody else's spell, we could just spend this instead of having to use this cast ability over here. This is an interrupt, so it can just be spent at any time. Then we've got this one right here, which says possession. So this is a regular one. It costs 4 mana. 3 points is pretty great. We can replace any single peon or warrior with our own. This may result in a war. Oh wow, that could be a nice little swing of power out on the map. And then finally we have mind control. Move any 1 enemy unit 1 region. That one is also pretty interesting, although I think in order to get the biggest swing, we are probably going to want to grab possession. It also happens to be worth the most points for us. It's now time for the elf player's last action. They're going to activate March, and they're going to use it to bring this warrior and this peon back into their courtyard. And now they are going to muster this peon to march again. This time they're just going to take these 2 warriors, and they're going to go 1, 2, 3, and start a battle in this region with these 2 peons. The Orc player decides to use the level 1 Blood Tent ability, which says before choosing tactics cards, they can spend 2 mana to turn one of their peons into a warrior, so they'll go down to just 1 mana. And they swap this peon out for the warrior, so now the elf player is at 4 strength to the 3 strength of the orcs. It's quite close, and again, ties go to the defender. So the elf player picks this card and the orc player picks this one. They flip them over, and right from the get-go here, they start looking at the different numbers, and it looks like with the barricade, the orc player was at 3 plus 3 or 6, and then the conscripts over here, they are at 4 plus 2 equals 6. However, the elf player now reveals this fireball spell. We see that it says combat, so they can play it during combat. It's going to cost them 4 magic, but they have 6. And down here it says before resolving a battle, deal 2 strength worth of damage to any one enemy. Well, that is just going to straight up kill this warrior right here. So where the orc player was winning with a tie, now they are losing by 2, and they lose this battle because of this spell. You'll notice with conscripts, it would cost food for each adjacent unit brought into the battle, but they didn't bring any in, so there's no cost there, and they still get the +2 strength against barricades, so that is why that worked out so well for them. The orc player does not have to pay this penalty, but this peon is going to get killed because the strength is currently 1, and you divide that in half and round up, which kills them. This fireball brings them from 6 magic down to 2, and now when they add that in with the 3 from conscripts, that was a 6 victory point battle, so a really good turn for the elf player. So the elf player jumps from 2 points all the way up to 8. That was the final action for the round, so we now all collect our resources. Our situation is a little different now. We have, let's see, just 2 iron ore over here. We still get our 4 food, and we are also still going to get our 4 mana, but we obviously get nothing for this spot because it was taken over by the orc player. The elf player down here, they are going to get 2, well, no, actually, they get 2 extra magic for this tower. So this is 4 magic right here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 food, and then 2 ore. Actually, a 3rd ore comes from over here because they control the region. They don't have any peons over here, but they may as well get the benefit for it. And finally, with the orc player, they get, let's see, 1, 2, 3 mana over here, and then the usual 6 food plus an additional ore for that spot over there that they took over. Funnily enough, we still cap out with everything. We weren't able to spend much in that round. It's kind of a weird problem to have. We really need to start spending all these resources, although if we keep getting beaten up by our opponents, well, we're not going to be generating that much, and it's probably just going to get worse for us. So we definitely need to find some way to turn around our current very defensive, somewhat weak position on the board. And then over here, the elf player is definitely able to get all of these resources they grabbed. Start player marker is going to move over to us, and we can reset all of our actions and start the next round. Let's go ahead and start things off by doing a build action, and we are going to build the 2nd level of our city, so that's going to cost us 4 of each resource. We're at 10 of everything, so we go down to 6, and we can put this out on the map. It's worth noting that we also just generated 4 victory points by going from level 1 to level 2 in the end game, and there's also +2 more strength defense for our capital city by putting this here, so we're less likely to just lose by having the opponent fly in, although all of the peons working the buildings in our capital area are going to help add defense to the city. But once again, peons don't really help against the orc player, so I think this is a good idea for many reasons. The elf player decides they are going to follow with that build action, and they are going to go ahead and build their mana tower over here. They already have a level 2 city, so that generates both of these benefits for them. This first one says they get to draw an extra card when they do the research action, so they draw 4 instead of 3, and this one now lets them cast 2 spells for 1 cast action. Most of the spells we've seen so far have been like in battle and whatnot, but there are many that happen outside, and that just makes them more efficient there. Also, they're anticipating getting to the 3rd level, in which case they get an extra victory point at the end of the game for each forest that they control. And like always, this costs 3 ore, so they go down to 5. The orc player has no peons, so they cannot follow, so now it is the elf player's actual turn. They decide to do a recruit action by going over here, and they want to recruit their sorceress hero. We see that's going to cost them 3 food and 2 mana, so they go down to 4 food and 4 mana. And in addition to being a somewhat strong unit on the board with 3 strength and 2 movement, the sorceress also comes with the fact that it generates 1 mana when the sorceress is in a forest, as well as 1 mana when the sorceress is adjacent to a forest. The sorceress starts out in the courtyard, which is effectively this location, so they are already adjacent to a forest. So this will already generate the magic even if they're in the courtyard at the end of their turn. The Orc player still has no peons, so they continue to pass. But we have the ability to tag on, and I think we may as well. So we will recruit, and let's do the fun thing of getting this big barge out onto the map. So we look down here, we see this costs 3 food and 3 ore. So we were at 6 of each of those, so we go down to 3. And this barge right now has a movement of 2 and a strength of 2. Realistically, the best part about it is that it can carry up to 3 people on the water. Also, when it's on the water, it can explore those water exploration spots, which in general can be pretty good. This massive unit comes into play on the shore of our citadel, so we'll kind of put it right there. Technically, it is on land at the moment. It's not actually in the water, so we can't quite explore this sea token just yet. The Orc player is going to use their first action to do a recruit, and they're just going to spend 1, 2, 3 of their food, and they're going to get 2 peons back. They're feeling a little bit gassed out by losing so many in that battle. I guess they traded one out and then lost the other. Not having any in their courtyard has really been painful, so they couldn't jump in on all those other actions that we've been doing. Since the dwarves and elves have both already recruited, nobody can follow, so they're done with that turn. It's our turn, and I think let's go ahead and cast this spell that we just pulled out. This one is 4 mana. We're at 6, so this brings us down to 2, but it's going to let us replace any single enemy peon or warrior with our own and get us 3 victory points. I'm not loving how this dragon could be going around chomping up my peons, so I think let's go ahead and attack the orc. We are going to possess this warrior right here in this forest and turn them into one of our warriors. So that's a pretty nice exchange. I really thought about trying to attack this dragon so that it could kind of get shooed away so it stops eating our people. But unfortunately, with the priestess and the warrior and the barge, I would still only have 2 extra attack power over the dragon and the shaman here. And unfortunately, 2 is not a big enough margin to really guarantee that I'll win. In fact, there's a possibility that I lose, and that would be really devastating to lose all those things. So instead, I'm just going to do this, swap out that warrior for ours. We're now going to generate an extra magic here, and it's further hurting the orc's resource generation engine. It definitely has some good offensive capabilities, but we're trying to kind of kill them through just starving them out, I guess. And those 3 points bring us up to 7. The elf player now activates March, and they are going to move their sorcerer out onto the board. With only a movement of 2, they go 1, 2 into this swamp. It is adjacent to a forest, so if the sorcerer ends here, they will still generate mana for the elf player. So we now flip over these exploration tokens. The first thing, oh no, this actually forces them to move, so they won't even get to look at the exploration token down here. Well, they figure they'll just use that move to pop over here, and they can then check the exploration token right here. They see that this one is another Wandering Knight. They can spend 1 ore in order to put a knight out onto the board, and they figure they will do that. They've had 2 of these. That was really quite nice for them. So they go from 5 ore down to 4, and they then muster this peon to do a second march action, and they decide they're going to consolidate their forces into this forest right here. The orc player is going to take the last action of the round, and it's going to be a build action. They're going to take their peon and go over here to build a sea dock. That costs 3 ore like normal, so this goes down to 3, and they now have the ability to recruit sea turtles in future turns. With that, the action round is over, so we all collect resources. It's going to be pretty similar to the last round. Let's see. Up here, we are going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 food, like always. We'll get 1, 2 ore. We're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 magic, but we'll actually get a 5th magic for this spot over here where we did that possession. The elf player is going to get 5 food. They're also going to get a ton of magic. They get, let's see, 1 for being there, 2, 3 for the tower, 4 for this peon right here, and 5 for the sorceress. So that's 5 magic total. And then over here, they're going to get, let's see, 1, 2, 3 ore. And lastly, the orc player is going to get 6 food, as they have for many turns now. They're going to get 2 magic over here, and a single ore for their dragon and shaman up at the top. The start player marker moves towards the elf player, and we can reset all of our action boards. The elf player starts by doing a build action, and they are just going to build the 3rd level of their city. It costs 7 of each of the resources, and they have that. It's going to pretty much bankrupt them, but they're okay with this. This will drop down to 0, and both of these go down to 2. And they put the 3rd level to their city into their capital. It's worth noting that you're only allowed to have 1 tower for each level of city you have, so they now actually have the ability to build all 3 of their towers, and that is actually one of the endgame triggers. They only have 1 tower built as of now, but that is potentially one way that this game might end. The orc player decides they are not going to follow, even though they do have a peon available. But I think we will follow with our peon right here, and we are going to build our first tower of the game. I think we're a little behind the times here. We probably should have gotten one of these out earlier for defensive purposes. And let's go ahead and put this out on the board. It must go in a region that already has a peon, so it could be these 5 regions over here, and I think we may as well just put it right here. It's worth 1 point for each spot it is away from our main castle. Unfortunately, this is just 1 location away, so it would cost us 1 ore, except we have that monastery built, so we get a -1 ore to our build cost, so this is actually free, even though it's only worth 1 point. It's also going to generate us a bunch of ore, I suppose. For the orc player's first action, they are going to recruit, and what they're going to grab is this totally awesome looking sea turtle. We can see it can hold 2 different people. It's going to cost them 3 food and 3 ore, so that brings them down to 1 ore and 7 food. It starts on the shore where their capital is, so we'll just kind of squeeze it in right there. And you can see it has an attack of 3, but it's pretty slow at only 2. However, it also gets +1 if attacking because they are level 1 and they're level 2, which gets them +2 to defending. So this is a pretty scary offensive and defensive turtle right there. Unfortunately, we don't have a peon to follow, but the elven player does, so they are going to put this guy right here. They only have 2 food, so they'll spend both of those food in order to generate one of their warriors. It's our turn, and I think that we want to recruit, spending 3 of our food and generating 2 peons. We now just have 2 in our reserve again, and this seems kind of weak. However, if you look down here to our barge, we see that not only does it give +3 strength when we're using the barricade tactic, so it's quite good at defense, but also any peons on board are +1 strength. So throwing a couple peons onto this barge is not a bad idea. Both the elves and the orc player have already recruited, so it is now the elf player's turn. The elf player will use their action to do research. Because of their mana tower, they get to draw 4 cards from the top of the deck. They already had 1, and they have 3 levels to their city, so they get to keep 3 of these spells total. So they keep these 3 and discard these 2. The orc player decides even with this peon they are not going to follow, but we figure we've got 2 peons in our area. Let's go ahead and follow. We get to draw 3. We have no spells in front of us at all, and we can keep 2 of them. So let's take 3 from the top of the deck and look at what our options are. The first one says Golem. It costs 2 mana, gives 1 victory point, and it lets you immediately take 2 build actions, each costing -1. Well, we already have -1, so if we took this, we could really build some incredibly cheap stuff, although at this point, I don't think more buildings are going to help us. We kind of need to increase our board presence. The next one says Conjure. This costs 3 mana, it gives 2 victory points, and it says take a warrior from your supply and place them into any region. Well, this one is very good. I think we'll probably be keeping this one. And let's see what the last one is. It says Scry. We can spend 2 mana, get a point to flip over and reveal any 2 exploration tokens. That seems pretty good. I think we're making enough ore, so we don't really need the golem. We're going to keep Scry and Conjure. The orc player is now going to do a regular march action. And first things first, if you remember, the second line on the shaman says that in addition to a march action, they can move the shaman into any region they control. Well, they figure they're done with this little sneak attack up here for the moment. They actually only attacked once, but they're getting much more concerned about the elf player actually winning, and it doesn't really make sense for them to keep beating up on us when the elf player might just get too strong and actually wipe them out or just keep them down as well. So they are going to summon this shaman all the way back to their courtyard, and they're going to pick up their dragon. They don't really want to leave it out here all defenseless where it could potentially get killed because, you know, it's not the cheapest thing in the world to recruit. It also takes action. So they're going to fly it back. They're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they'll land in this mountain region. So they're essentially leaving one mountain region and going into another. They get to open up this, this exploration token reveals a portal. So the thing is, you could spend 2 ore to fill this portal in, but the orc player only has 1 ore, and this is the moment they need to fill it in. So I'm just going to leave this portal right here. Suddenly, that is an interesting way that we could jump over into the orc player's area. Also, they could jump into ours. The orc player now musters this peon to do the sail action. This is the first sail action of the game, actually. So they're going to pick up their shaman and put them into their sea turtle. And their sea turtle can move twice, so they are currently on land, so they first move into the water space here, and then they're going to move into this water space that's kind of between the two continents. When they stop there, they get to flip over this water exploration tile, and this sea turtle is now in a very good position to potentially attack over here, attack over there, or even maybe defend a little bit. So it's getting into the action with the shaman on board, and this token is, oh, it's a pirate. So this would lose the orc player one of every resource if this was an unmanned vessel. But since there is a unit on board, then the pirates are scared off and nothing actually happens. It's time for us to take the last action of the round, and I think let's start by going to the cast spot, and let's do this conjure we looked at before. So it's going to cost us 3 of our magic. We currently have 7, so we go down to 4. It's going to get us 2 victory points, and we can now take a warrior from our supply and put it into any region. The 2 points puts us just barely back in the lead with 9 points total. And let's go ahead and put the warrior into this region right here with the tower. There we go. Because this is a very scary looking army right here, and we want to fortify this spot just a little bit. And next up, let's go ahead and use this peon to do a muster. And this time we are going to do the sail action. We're going to take this warrior here, put them into our barge, which can hold 3 people, which is a bunch, and then the barge is going to move twice. It's going to go once into the open right here, and then the second time it's just going to land on this spot where this warrior currently is. So they're effectively on the same spot. I'm just going to pull the warrior out to show that they're kind of sort of on the land right there. With that, the actions are done for this round, so once again, we get to take up all of our resources. It's definitely getting pretty crowded out there on the board. We'll start with us. In this spot right here, there's just 1 circle for a peon, so that's 1 ore for controlling the region, 1 for the peon, and 2 for the tower. So that's 4 total ore there. But then we are also, let's see, nope, that's all the ore we get. So 4 there, we get our 4 food, we're going to get our 4 mana up there, and then finally we actually are going to get 1 more mana for this forest that we touched down in over there. The elf player is going to get 1, 2, 3 ore. They are also right here going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 magic, and they're going to get 5 food. And now the orc player is going to get 1 ore for the dragon being in this spot. They're going to get 6 food, like always it seems, for these 2 spots here. And this right here is going to get them 2 mana. The first player marker is going to move over to the orc player, and we can go ahead and ready all of our actions again. The orc player is going to start by doing an action we haven't seen in a while, and that is tax. They are really low on ore, so they are going to go ahead and grab 4 of them from this taxation spot right here. We are not going to follow, but the elf player is going to. They have 3 of their peons here in their courtyard, so they'll spend 1, and they are also going to get 4 ore, bringing them up to 7, and then this is going to cycle around. For our first move, we are just going to do a regular old march. And we'll take this peon, and they're just going to go 1, 2. And then we are going to muster and do a march again. And this allows this peon to go 1, 2, and join the region with this barge. It's now the elf player's turn, and they like the look of our turn. They're going to do something very similar, so they are going to march. And let's see, they are going to take 1 of their peons and their warrior here. And they're just going to pop out over here into this forest and see what this exploration token is. And it gets them an ore. They were at 7. They are now at 8 over here on the board. And now they'll use this peon to do a muster march as well, just like we did. And they're going to take both of these characters and they're going to go 1, 2, and just fortify their mountain position over here. It's now the orc player's turn, and they are also going to do a command. They've decided to do sail. They were originally planning to go over here and try to take back this region, but they've decided to just turn this turtle around and attack this spot right here with a single peon. The turtle's strength is 4, plus 3 for the shaman brings the orc player to 7, and plus 1 actually because of the 1 peon, so it's 8 to 1 right now for the orc player, so they're in a pretty good position. Both players simultaneously choose a card, and then they flip them, and they both just chose the free option because, well, it wasn't worth it to the elf player to retreat because they figured they'd most likely lose 2 victory points, and, well, they're currently making a lot of iron over here. So they just essentially conceded the fight. They didn't have to lose anything, so the orc player wins, which is no surprise. The peon is going to get killed, and the orc player is going to get 2 victory points, which brings them up to 6. And now the orc player is going to do a muster, and they are going to choose the fly option. They're going to take their dragon, which has 4 movement. They'll move once here, 2 here, so they still haven't gone into a region with the opponent's pieces, 3 to here, and finally 4 to dive into this region here. You'll notice these are both peons, so the dragon just right away eats one of the peons. They are removed from the board, and now the battle happens. The dragon has an attack power of 2 plus 1 for this peon right here, so it's right now 3, 2, 1. Both sides select a tactics card simultaneously, they flip them over, and we see that the orc player chose siege and the elf player chose first strike. They were pretty sure that the orc player was going to go conscripts, but that's not actually what happened. So the orc player was at 3 and the elf player was at 1. Well, we see here that first strike gets +3 against siege, so that is 5 plus 1 or 6. But then over here we have 3 plus 4 for the orc player, which gets them to 7, which means they win. They're going to get 2 victory points, but they are going to lose 4 ore. And of course, this peon is going to get killed because they're the only one in the battle. So they go down to 2 ore, and they've caught up to the elf player in victory points at 8. It's our turn, and I think we want to build our second tower. We can do that because we have 2 levels to our capital. And we want to build it right over here into this forest. We could do that because we were able to get this peon over here, and we could see as far as distance is concerned, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 away from our capital, so it would cost 4 ore, but we get a discount of 1. So we go from 9 ore down to 6. Neither of our opponents have peons in order to follow, so it goes to the elf player, and they are going to copy us once again. They're going to go to the build action, and they are going to build their second tower out onto the map. They've decided to put it right here. That's why they forced this peon all the way over into that region. So they kind of add that over there, and we see that it is, let's see here, 1, 2, 3 away from their capital, so that's going to cost 3 ore. So they go from 8 down to 5. With that, we're done with actions, and let's now try to figure out how many resources we're all going to get. So let's start with us. Up here at the top, we are going to get 2 magic for that spot, and then over here in the forest, we're going to get 2 more plus 2 for our tower. So we get 6 mana overall. Then we are going to get 4 food for these 2 spots, and then right here, we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 iron for being in that location. The elf player grabs their usual 5 mana for this spot right here. They haven't moved these troops out just yet. Then down here, they're going to get 2 food. That definitely hurt their food engine down here by that dragon gobbling everybody up. And then over here, they're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 ore. And finally, the orc player is going to get 6 food plus 2 mana over here. They're going to get 2 ore for this spot over here. I'm sorry, just 1 ore because they occupy it. And then 1 food for that spot over here with the dragon. The first player token moves over to us, and we can reset all of our actions. With our first action, I think now seems like a pretty good time to go ahead and build and do our final step to our capital. We have 10 of everything, so this is one way to spend a bunch of stuff. We lose 7 of each of them, bringing us down to 3, and we can finally take the last piece out and put it underneath our capital. We can see now that every mountain we control at the end of the game is going to be 1 more point for us, and we see with our barge, when sailing, the barge can instantly move to the capital or a seaside tower, so that's pretty great. Also, our priestess now gets +1 strength for each other friendly unit in her region. Well, right now there are 2 others, so she is a 5 strength character at the moment, a very powerful hero. The elf player has decided they are going to follow with that build action, and with it they are going to build their final tower. They could do this because they already are at their 3rd level in their capital. They only have 1 spot to put it, which is right here with this peon, so it's only going to cost them 1 ore, and it only gets them 1 victory point. But the biggest reason they're doing this is because they have now achieved the exploitation objective. 1 player has all 3 of their towers out, so the endgame has been initiated. The elf player figures right now they are in a strong position, and they think if the game was to go too much longer, potentially we could actually ramp up and go ahead of them. So they're trying to stop the game now-ish, but what's going to happen is we're going to finish this round, and then we're going to do 1 more round. So we essentially have 1.5 rounds left to the game as it stands. The orc player decides they are not going to build, so it is now the elf player's turn. The elf player decides they are going to recruit. They will spend 2 of their food, and with it, they are going to take their last warrior into their courtyard. The orc player decides to follow, and they are just going to spend 3 food in order to make 2 more peons into their courtyard. And we will follow as well. We will spend 2 food, and we'll put a new warrior into our courtyard. The orcs decide to build, and they're going to take a peon, and they're going to put it down here and create a pit arena. This is going to cost them all 3 of their ore, and now what this does is every 2 peons are worth +1 when attacking, and if they win a battle using peons, they immediately get an ore and a magic. It's maybe a little late for this, but it also unlocks the Berserker, which is a very cool hero that they're hoping to get out in the next turn and maybe use once. You can see down here that the first step says when the Berserker attacks, your opponent must discard 2 resources before the battle begins, so that's pretty painful. And the next one says that if the Berserker loses the battle, they can spend 2 magic to gain 2 attack power if that would allow you to win the battle. Also, it is quite fast at 4 speed, and it's also 2 strength, so that's a pretty cool hero. The dwarves and elves have both built already, so they cannot follow on with that action, and it's now back to us. I think we'll start simple by doing a march command. And let's grab this warrior and peon. They start in the capital, and they're just going to go over here because at the end of the game we get 1 point for every single region that we control, not including our capital. So we may as well go into the swamp, see what these encounters are, and then maybe do a muster in order to push the peon over into that mountain area, especially considering mountains give us extra points at the end of the game. So this first one right here, oh, it's a monster, crud. So we need to spend 2 food or lose a person, and unfortunately right now we only have 1 food, so this is very poor timing for us. Well, we don't really have much of a choice, and warriors are worth 1 point at the end of the game, so this peon is going to get killed, and now we get to see the other exploration marker, which is, oh man, this is another not so nice one. This one forces us to spend 2 magic in order to get a new spell, or we lose a unit. Fortunately for us, we do have 2 mana. In fact, we have 3, so we'll go down to 1, and now we draw 1 spell. We have 2 levels to our capital, so we are able, actually no, I take it back, we have 3 levels, so we could hold 3 spells. We currently have this one, so let's see, this one says scavenge, collect 3 resources of your choice. That is not terribly interesting at this point in the game. Well, let's go ahead and muster this peon over here so we get 1 march command. And we'll send this warrior into the mountain so that at least we generate some ore at the end of this turn. The elf player decides they are going to cast. They are going to get to summon 2 different spells because of their mana tower right here. And they have 3 spells in their hand right now, so they're going to do these 2. They both cost 2 mana each. They're currently at 10, so they'll go down to 6. We see this one right here gets 1 point, and it says summon. They can move 1 peon to a region that they control. And the other one is called grow. It is also worth 1 point, and they can just select 1 region and immediately collect double the resources from it. They've decided to grab this peon and move them over into this region with the tower. There's only 1 circle on the ground down there. And then as far as generating resources, they'll just go ahead and do this one. Right now it's generating 2 food for them, so they'll make 4 food. Not that it really matters. They were going to peg out anyway. They mostly played the 2 spells so that they could get to 2 victory points. So they go from 5 up to 9 food. Now they'll use this peon to do a regular muster march, and they'll take this warrior. And with it, they're going to go 1, 2. I think they're going to stop here and see what this exploration token is. It might generate another warrior for them, which would be victory points. They could also go over here and get more ore, but they're going to peg out anyway. So they flip this over and, oh no, it's just going to give them a food. They didn't really need that, but that's fine for them. And now the orc player is going to do a regular march action, and they are going to move a peon out on the board. They don't really need this food. They have it for a while, and they're going to move over here so that they can generate some ore. The action round is done, so let's go ahead and get our resources. We are going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ore. We're going to get our 4 food, and then we'll get 1, 2 magic over there, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 total magic. The elf player continues to get 5 magic for all these people right here. They kind of consolidated them and then didn't end up having a good way to attack. They were worried about moving over here and then having somebody swoop in and grab the tower, but I imagine these will probably move on the last round of the game. So they're going to get 5 magic for this right here. They're going to get, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 food down here, and then this over here is going to get 1, 2, 3 iron. And lastly, the orcs are going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 food, they're going to get 2 ore, and then they're going to get 2 magic. Oh, I almost forgot, they get 1 ore and 1 food for these as well. The start player is going to move over to the elves, and this is the final round of the game. The first action the elves do is research. They are going to draw 4 cards from the top of the spell deck, and when they mix in the one they already have, they can now keep 3 out of these 5 spells. They're going to keep these and discard these 2. Neither the orcs nor the dwarves have decided to follow with that research action, so it's now the orc player's turn. For the orcs' first action, they are going to recruit, and they want their berserker. This is going to cost them 5 food, so they go from 10 down to 5. And this crazy looking berserker is going to join them in their courtroom. We decide to follow, and we're just going to spend 2 food taking yet another warrior. In fact, this is our final warrior, and putting them in our courtyard. And the elf player is also going to recruit, but they don't have any more warriors actually to put into their courtyard, so they're just going to go ahead and take a couple peons. They're definitely kicking themselves now for not having unlocked either of these options to get the flying phoenix or the boat or any of those kind of things out, so they just have tons of peons in their courtyard. It's now our turn, and I think we're just going to do a march, and we're going to take this warrior and this peon. And they start in the capital, and for one move they could go all the way to this tower because they are functionally adjacent, and for their second move they're going to go into this swamp right here, and we can now start looking at these exploration tokens. The first one, oh no, it's another portal. I am not sure if we want anybody sneaking into this spot, so we're going to go ahead and spend 2 of our ore. Right now we have 8, so now we're down to 6 in order to get rid of this, and then we'll see the other one, and this just gets us 1 food, which brings us up to 4. It's time for the elves' final move of the game. They're going to start by doing the cast action. They're going to cast 2 out of their 3 spells, and it's going to be Weaken and Rift. We see that that is 5 mana total, so they'll go down to 5. That is 3 victory points total, and we see that the Weakened one says you can change an enemy warrior into a peon, and then the other one says that they can select a land region that they control and 1 face-down land exploration token, then reveal the token and apply that effect to the specific region they pointed out. The orc player does not actually have any warriors out right now, so the elf player decides to weaken this warrior into a peon for us. And for the rift, they are going to choose this region right here, and they're going to take this exploration token, flip it over, and now they're really hoping to find something like a lost knight or something like that to go into this region, although I guess they are fully deployed, so they didn't have that many options available to them. But either way, they mostly just did this for the victory points, and I guess they'll get 1 ore. They were already pegged out, and the 3 points brings them up to 11. And lastly, they are going to muster into a march. And quite simply, they are just going to move, let's see, this warrior into this mining area. Now, they have all this strength right here, but they never really got better mobility with the Phoenix or maybe with a boat, and there were such good defenses around here, it just didn't make sense for them to go in and attack, especially with a turn order with them being first. If they just left everything here to go and try and attack and probably win a fight over here, then one of the other opponents would probably swoop in and destroy this tower right behind them. So they decided not to take that risk and just spread out, taking some more territory. And for the orc player's final action, they are just going to go over here and do a march. They're going to take this peon and this berserker, and they will start here, and they will go 1, 2, which doesn't quite get them all the way to their destination. Unfortunately, peons are quite slow. So they'll use this peon to muster another march, so that they can send these 2 into battle in this region, trying to destroy our 2 peons. We were kind of hoping that we would be able to stay here with the warrior and the peon, but having one of them get weakened definitely hurt our chances. We were really hoping to build a tower there, but it's not looking so good for us now because the berserker has 2 strength, and then immediately they are going to use their blood tent and 2 of their mana to turn this peon into a warrior. So they're currently at 4, 5, 6, because of course they get +1 for each enemy peon in the zone, compared to R2. Things are not looking great for us. I don't really see us having any chance of winning, but the biggest number we can put out is the charge here, and we do actually have the magic for it, so let's go ahead and pick this one. And it looks like the orc player also picked charge, probably because it has the biggest number, and also it's worth 3 victory points down at the bottom. So when we total all that up together, we are at, let's see, 5 + 2 is 7, and they were at 6 + 5 is 11, so they definitely win. We lose half of our units, so this peon dies, and the other one is going to go back to our courtyard. We don't have to pay the 5 magic, but the orc player does. And that brings them down to just 2 magic. And 3 victory points ties them with the elves at 11. It is time for our last action of the game, and we could do a big military push, but our forces are a little bit fragmented, and the best odds we have would be a +2, and if we lost, then we would potentially lose a lot of victory points in units. So I think we'll just do the nice, easy thing to coast in at the end of the game. We will go to build, and we will put our 3rd and final tower down. We were hoping to put it in that far-off spot where we put those peons, but the orc player beat us back. So instead, we'll just go here. That is 2 spots away from our castle, so that's going to cost 2 - 1 ore, so 1 ore, and it's going to be worth 2 points to us at the end of the game. So we go from 6 ore down to 5, and now the elf player could technically follow, but there's no real reason for them to, because these buildings in and of themselves don't give you points. It's the units that you train from them that actually get you points. So they're going to go ahead and pass, and with that, that is the final action of the game. Let's go ahead and do resource collection and then go into the final scores. We are making 1, 2, 3, 4 iron here, as well as a 5th iron over there. We're going to get the 4 food, as we have for most of the game, as well as, let's see, now we get 1, 2, 3, 4 magic there, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 magic for this spot over here. So yeah, quite a bit of stuff. Now looking at the elves, they are going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, or they're also going to grab 1, 2, 3, 4 food, and this is right here is going to get them, let's see, that's the 5 magic that they've been consistently giving all game long. And finally we have the orcs. They get the 1 food for this, they get 1 ore for that, they get 2 ore over here, 4 food in that location, and finally this is a swamp, so they don't actually get stuff there. Oh, finally they get 2 magic for this forest. And with that, the game is over. Let's now jump into final scoring and see who won. The first thing for us to count is all the victory points we got for our various units that are built right now. So looking around, our priestess is worth 2 points, and our warriors are worth 1 point, and our barge is also worth 2. So we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, then we have 4, 5 for the barge, 6 for that warrior, 7 and 8 for those 2 warriors. So that is 8 points total because we don't have any point scoring units inside of our courtyard. This brings us from 9 all the way to 17. The elves also have no point scoring units in their courtyard, so they're going to get 2 for each, the summoner and the assassin, that's 4 total. And then they get 5, 6, and then 7, 8, so that's 8 points for them as well. This brings them from 11 up to 19. Oh, actually the elves had 1 more warrior hiding in here, so they get an additional point. So they're actually at 20 points. Next up we have the orcs, who don't have many warriors out but have a lot of the special units. So they get 2 for the dragon, then 2 for the turtle, 2 for their shaman, and 2 for their berserker up there, and I think they only have the 1 warrior out on the field, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 points. So just like the elves, they are also at 20 points. Next up we have points for buildings. I misspoke earlier when I said you did not get points for them. It's actually 1 point each, so we are going to get 2 points total, which brings us to 19. The elves really should have 1 more building because, as I said, they could have followed up on our building action in order to build that 1 spot. So let's go ahead and pretend that they had put this right here in that final action of our turn. So they're going to get 3 points for these buildings, which takes them to 23. And the orc player has 4 buildings, so that's 4 points. So for the moment, they are in the lead with 24. If you remember, towers are worth 1 point for each region they are away from our main capital. So this one is adjacent to the capital, so it's worth 1 point. This is 2 sections away, so that's 2 points. And this one over here is 1, 2, 3, 4 away because of this ferry right here. That means that this right here is going to be a 4-point tower, so that's 4, 5, 6, 7 points total for us. And that brings us up to 26. The elf player has this one that is 1 away, this one that is 2 away, and this one over here, which is 1, 2, 3 away, so that's 3 plus 2 plus 1, or 7 points total, and that jumps them up to 30. Lastly, we have the orc player who only managed 1 tower. That is, let's see, 1, 2 away from their capital, so just 2 points. And with that, they're now tied for us at the back. Next up, we all score points for our capital city level. Both us and the elf player were able to get to the 3rd level, so that's 10 points for both of us. But unfortunately for the orc player, they only got to level 2, so that is 5 points for them. This jumps the elves up to 40, and then we go from 26 up to 36. The orc player was at 26, so they go up to 31. Now we get 1 point for every region we control besides our starting capital. So we are in this one, so that's 1 point, 2 points, 3, 4, 5, and then this is still over in this section, so that is 6 total points for us, which will bring us to 42. The elf player has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which jumps them up to 45. And the orc player has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which brings them up to 37. Finally, we have the bonus points for the 3rd level monastery and the 3rd level mana tower. We will get 1 point for every mountain region we control, and the elf player gets 1 point for every forest region they control. We control 2 mountain ranges, so that's an extra 2 points, bringing us to 44. And the elf player only controls this one forest here, so that's an extra 1 point, bringing them from 45 up to 46. And with that, we have our final scores. The elf player was able to sneak by with a win with 46 points. We were 2 points behind at 44, and unfortunately for the orc player, they were just a little bit too far behind. It was a pretty big hit not having them get to that 3rd level for their city. So that is the end of the game. The elf player is the winner. I hope you enjoyed this playthrough. I have to admit this one was somewhat challenging for me to make for a couple different reasons. The main one being that I don't generally play dudes on a map style games where you have units, you expand and take control of territory and then fight with your opponents. So having me control 3 of these different players all at the same time maybe exacerbated that issue. I think I maybe played it more as a Euro game, building engines, getting resources and all that, and downplayed the combat that is definitely possible in this game, especially when you consider how near the end of the game, a couple of the races were just maxing out on their resources, which is something you don't want to have happen. It means that those people had too much of a peon infrastructure. They were getting more resources than they could spend, so if they had less peons and maybe were kind of fluctuating back and forth with their resources, then they would probably have more of the military units out on the board, and then I think the military conflicts would have been probably a little bit more interesting and more numerous. Also, of course, this is a game where 2 people simultaneously decide what they're going to do and flip, so I had to figure out what I thought this character would probably do and what they thought this other person would think they're probably going to do, and I think it showed off pretty much all the nooks and crannies of the game. There were a few battles, there was quite a bit of expanding, there was definitely some exploring, and a bunch of buildings were built. Although I do feel especially bad for the orc player. I don't think I played them very well. Right from the very first turn of the game, I think I'd set them back a bit with them not being able to follow the other 2 players in order to get a couple new peons by having them do that muster command to just do 2 moves on that first round. I think that put them on the back foot for pretty much the whole game when it came to resources and just recruiting. Even though they had some very offensive, awesome military powers, they didn't quite get to really push those out onto the map. They kind of did some guerrilla tactics with that dragon eating a couple peons, but it didn't really affect the end game because the orc player lost by a rather sizable amount. There's also just so many different asymmetric abilities that all these buildings have on them, so it's kind of hard for me to keep track. I really tried to show some of the cool different powers that the heroes had, as well as some of the buildings, and I think in the end I did a moderately okay job of showing that stuff off. I think the game is probably much more exciting and dynamic when it's 3 different people who are actively good at this style of game. This is not the type of game I usually gravitate towards. I like more indirect conflict versus just smashing each other in the face with, you know, a bunch of armies like this game has, but for a game that is about that, you know, it's about making armies and expanding and exploring, I think that the way those things evaluate, like the way that you can decide how you want to spend your resources to flip over those tactics cards, is a pretty neat way to do it. It's not just like analyzing these numbers, analyzing those numbers, and there are no dice in this game, which is a good thing. I think that the unexpected outcomes to the battles come from flipping over those cards and saying, oh, you know, this card canceled that card, and I thought you would do this, and thinking and double thinking, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of dice around, which I think many of this style of game oftentimes resort to. So I think that pretty much wraps up everything I have to say about this playthrough. I'd like to thank everybody who's been supporting this channel through Patreon, including all of these producer level pledges. If you too would like to directly help support this channel, you can do so at patreon.com, and I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to see more full game playthroughs like this one, as well as in-depth board game reviews and vlogs that I do about once a month, then please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.